A beautiful morning to you. Still the weekend show, and this is the time where we'll get to have a discussion. And this morning we'll be having a kind of shift. We usually have discussion segment maybe on political issues, social issues around us. This one is also social issue, but it's also a special interview with a creative, not just a creative, somebody who has done so much in the education sector. He is Daniel Okoye, the author of Practical Oral English for Secondary Schools. Together, we'll be looking at this book and also other issues in secondary education on the program this morning. Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
I want us to have this conversation about your book while also discussing the training that our students pass through in secondary schools, and I want you to share your experience while at it. But let's get into the book first.
Okay.
As a secondary school student, I had this idea whenever they start to teach oral English, that this woman may waste her time. Okay, if I know oral English or about what's the essence, you know, and let me ask you that question. What's the essence for oral English? Why should we learn it? Why should a secondary school engineering So I just want you to get into it. Yeah.
You know, when we talk about being a student in Nigeria, we may not hide it, but the fact remains that we want to have good grades.
Yeah.
And that's the end result of why many of us are in schools. So sometimes when we look at students, that person who wants to be an engineer is looking at his or her result. That person who wants to be a medical doctor is also looking at the result. And English is part of the requirement. Being a former colony of the British, of Britain, English is needed. And in as much as English is not our lingua franca, as some people have tried to put it, but it's needed for communication purposes and other purposes. So as it concerns this oral English, you need it because it's part of is an aspect of the English exam. And there is a paper called the English Paper 3, which is the test of oral English. So it's needed for your grades, it's needed for you to have good grades in your SSCE.
But generally, as a person, is that an empowerment? For me, why I'm emphasizing this, right from childhood, I knew I would go into broadcasting, but I didn't see a reason. It was at university level, or at a level of my secondary school, I started understanding that there is no way I will go far in broadcasting without having to learn oral English. And now I had to learn it at a late hour. But those days that we were in junior secondary, whenever the teacher is coming, you say, anti-oral abiakwa. You get that kind of reaction, as if these people are stressing you and all those. Why is it important beyond the school environment, beyond passing exams?
Well, it's important, just like you talked about it in the junior secondary level and the senior secondary level. It's important for communication purposes. Now look at you. You agree with me that when you were learning this oral English for your job, the experience you had in secondary school was an added advantage.
Yes.
So it's needed for the society. When you communicate in the society, when you speak, you go to events and speak, and the experience you had in secondary school, had it been you didn't learn it in secondary school, it's going to be a very difficult thing for you to learn it in your job.
Okay. Now let's get into why you had to write this book. I know you hold a master's and a master's degree in media and communication studies. I also know you've been in school education, teaching English and literature for years. Why out of all the areas, literature, English, lexicon, and all those, you chose to write a book on practical oral English?
Okay, remember if I have the book, I want to say something about it. You know, the problem we have with our examinations is this: understanding the nature of the questions.
Okay.
Be it biology, be it chemistry, be it literature, be it government. So sometimes we discover that the teachers don't even understand the structure or the pattern of the subject they're teaching as it concerns SSCE. So sometimes you should be thanking your teachers for teaching that oral English, because I've had coaching with some students and I discovered that their secondary school teacher wasn't talking about this oral English. Okay. It's a difficult aspect of English. Exactly. It's very difficult. And sometimes mother tongue interference could be a problem. So the problem now, the issue now is that some teachers, you know, hide from teaching it. Maybe they felt that they're not competent enough. And sometimes you can't give what how do they say it? You can't give what you don't have, or however they put it. So, and there is a paper we call paper 3. Okay. For 45 minutes. You have 60 questions for 30 marks. And 30 marks is a big deal. It's a big deal. And when we teach, for instance, essay writing, we tell students that we deduct half mark in mechanical accuracy. And sometimes students will be like, half mark. But we explain to them that when you sum up these half marks, you end up getting 0/10. And for you to score 0/10, you are not doing very well. So I want students to know about this part of English exam, this paper called paper 3, the test of oral English. I would, if you carry out a research, you discover that many students in some secondary schools, let me not say government secondary schools, in some secondary schools did not know about test of oral English as a paper for their SSCE until that day. And it's written on a separate way. For instance, we have the paper 1 and 2, which is the objectives and the theory, where we have our essay writing, comprehension, and summary. And this is paper 3. It comes after paper 1 and 2. And paper 1 and 2 is what we call composite paper combined. So that is the issue about it. So I discovered that many students are not aware of what happens in the exam hall. If I should leave English and talk about literature in English, I understand you sat for literature. And now it will interest you to know that the person who marked your prose wasn't the person who marked your drama and poetry. But many students do not know. So after the exam now, maybe you've sat for literature in English, maybe the council will take your prose, that's what we call the novel, to Adamawa. And then take your drama and poetry to somebody in maybe Meduguri or somebody in somewhere in Lagos. But many students don't know. They just think somebody will sit in his or her room and mark it for them. So in this literature, since we are talking about the English, so this literature in English now, if you look at it now, we have the one we call paper 1 and 2, which is the objectives, where we have the Shakespearean theory, Shakespearean play that comes in objectives, and then other literary terms, and the paper 2, which is prose, we have the African and non-African. Then paper 3, you don't write it same day. So maybe you write paper 1 and 2 today, maybe 2 days later, 3 days later, you write paper 3. And in paper 3, we have drama and poetry. Students are expected to answer 4 questions. So we discover that some teachers don't even understand the terrain, so they just go and teach. So for this practical oral English, it's because of the issues at stake that made me put up this work.
So what are the major issues or teaching areas that people find difficult that you dealt with in this book?
Practically everything that, you know, when I was putting up this paper, I wanted to call it a practical oral English for exam class. But I felt like I'm trying to push it to the extreme. So I decided to make it a general something that it will be needful or useful to those in exam classes and then everyone. Because in this book, we also have some words we commonly mispronounce. In English language, there's what we call nominalization. Sometimes a word moves from noun and becomes a verb. And we discovered that words like pronounce is a verb. But when it becomes a noun, many of us will say pronunciation. So even though it's pronunciation, and even in the spelling, the nouns OU will not come there. But many people, and then we have prepare and the preparation, what we call preparation. We also have the reserve and the reservation. So these areas now are needed for someone, maybe as a journalist, a practicing broadcast journalist, and for someone who wants to
speak well.
So we try to cover all the areas needed in that test of oral English exam.
All right, there was something you raised while answering the questions about oral English. You talked about teachers who shy away from even teaching it. Or students, for instance, those days, I like to share my experience when it comes to this kind of issues. You see students who will read every other part of English and avoid oral because it's confusing. Maybe they don't understand how diphthongs work, how vowels work, how consonants work, and all those things. And especially you raise the issue of interferences,
mother tongue
interferences in speaking. And some of those things affect the overall interest. In fact, I would say that apart from core grammar, oral English is something else that fears students more than mathematics. Now, how do you make it easier for them to understand in this book, and how do you think teachers who are teaching oral English in their different schools can begin to address these things, come to it, and make it more easy for their students?
Okay, just like you said about the content and how to make it easier. We have it in this book because there's a place I have a postscript where I give advice. Even in the beginning, I wrote here how to succeed in the test of Oral's English exam. And I always tell Igbo people that we should not feel threatened or feel we are being overstressed as it concerns learning oral English. Our alphabet is also our phonetic symbols. Yes. Igbo is very simple. I tell people, it's not that like the Yoruba language that will write Ladipo and expect you to pronounce Ladipo. So in the Yoruba language, you learn, Yoruba is somehow like English. You learn the alphabet and you start looking for the sounds. But in English, in Igbo, the alphabet is the sounds. Yes. So it's unique. And when you look at our Igbo phonetic symbols, you see that they are almost same, the same design, almost. I'm not saying equivalent, almost. So when you look at that, if you have a good teacher who attends training, yes, we have a British Council training, which I always attend anytime there is a call-up. So if you have teachers who are always engaging in training, discussions, I don't think it will be a problem. So I outlined them here, and especially some words that do not exist in Nigerian languages and how to pronounce them. And it's always advisable for teachers to pronounce the words very well, and they encourage the student to say after them. Make some sentences with those words. For instance, we understand that sometimes we say wanted, it's supposed to be wanted. Now, if you're telling students that when the sound, let me just say T to make it closer now, when the sound ends a verb, and that verb has ED, that whatever comes should pronounce wanted. You are wanted. So the teacher should not just say, oh, it's wanted, and we expect. No, the teacher should make sentences with that. The teacher can now say, oh, Dave, you are wanted by the police. So the children or the students should also chorus it. It may be funny because in such classes you'll be like, ha ha ha, what are you? That's not what we hear. And when you tell them to say wicked, let them use it too. I explained all this here. So they should use it use them in sentences. Teachers should not just say, oh, say wanted, and the children will say wanted and they just keep quiet. Oh, you're wanted by the police. You're expected to do this. So they say it that way, they will master it. So I have a postscript here. I think it's on somewhere on page 76, where I gave what teachers should also do to make sure that the learning is easier. So,
all right, let's not reveal everything about the book so that they don't get to read everything on air here. I now want to ask a question about, you talked about training. And you see several teachers who are in the school system who don't attend trainings. At times, it is not because they don't want to, but the system where they find themselves are not providing them the opportunity to do that. And they continue to, over and over again, go around in circles. How would you advise those in government, owners of private schools, to provide this kind of routine trainings or opportunities, give their teachers access to some of them so that they can know what is happening in their industry and also get training?
Well, I think when it comes to training in industry, I think it's a thing of mindset. Okay. Many Nigerians don't like attending training. It's not a matter of are there things put in place to cater for that. There was a time, sorry I'm saying this, I'm a member of English Language Teachers Association. There was a time we were able to get the sponsorship of the British Council, and we hosted a training for teachers over there at the library. And when
in Anambra.
yes, when we sent out invitation, people kept asking, what else will I benefit? Apart from how to teach this English, what else do you want me to get? And they keep asking, item 7, item 7, item 7. And we made a provision for 50 participants, and we ended up having, I think we had about 20 or 25%, and nearly the surplus, the provision we made for them, the item 7, and many people, so you see, I don't think it's a problem of being a facility or no. When I attended,
it's a mindset issue.
Yeah, it's a mindset issue. People should, you can pay for your training, but no, they want the principal to pay for the training. Oh, let me go and tell, are they catering for it? If they're not, I will sit in my house, and you see them moving around. Moving around. I was telling a friend, one of the newly recruited teachers, that these days we don't teach essay writing with, students go and write about an accident that happened on the road. You can group them now, give them. These are when you group them, you are giving members tasks. And when they come out to present it, what area did you participate? What did you do? What did you do? But still, these armchair teachers will go home and tell them, well, you're right about this. And nobody is even saying you have a Facebook friend that you just met, you people became friends a few days ago. So training is a thing of mindset. It's a personal thing. So most times those who do not attend training were not doing so because there was maybe are they extended for something. I think it's because when you are ready.
So how do we change that mindset? Because like you said, it's not just in teaching or English language teaching. You hear people like, especially in people under government employ, allowance. And if there is no monetary provision for that, nobody's interested to go. So how do we change this mindset? Because if we are not bringing out, or if we are not training people who are readily competitive in the international market, you know that we'll continue to produce an education system that is beyond par, that is mediocre. So what do we do to address some of these issues?
Orientation remains the first thing. Orientation. We need to start moving around. The Ministry of Education should encourage it. Let the training not be the one for teachers to come and meet each other and discuss about their principles. Yes, it's always a problem. I've attended one recently, and the teachers I start with ended up discussing their principles and their zonal director, and it was very annoying. So let it not be the one they will come around and start discussing the principle that was newly transferred to their school or something. There should be orientation. They should know that you have future. You have, it's like a transit situation. Your training could be an opportunity for you somewhere. But I discovered something with some Anambra teachers. I'm sorry to say that, because the system, the promotion in the system is just a thing of after 3 years you move on. After 3 years you move on. Most of them are not bothered. They feel like training or no training, after 3 years, promotion. So that's orientation. I think orientation is the core thing that should be done. And maybe those freebies, maybe they could consider that too, since it's what people... It's not a bad idea. Maybe have a customized materials, maybe jotter, pen. Yes, it could be an incentive.
All right, finally, still on teaching oral English. In the olden days, you hear about language labs, where people are taught, you listen, you practice, and all those. They are rarely in schools now. Even in schools where students are meant to pay, private schools, some even British schools, you go there, you don't see language labs. How do we begin to address this kind of issues in our public and private school system for investors in those areas to see importance that you need to provide language lab for this kind of lessons to have the effects they should?
Well, parents have rules to play in situations like this. Because you remember when we were little that sometimes you return from school, your father or your mother will carry your bag and ransack it, check what you've done. So when it comes to language lab, we still have language labs scattered everywhere in many government secondary schools, but they've been turned to staff room. So they've been turned to staff room. You go there, language teachers occupy it and take it as their own office. So parents should encourage that. But we have a generational gap.
Okay.
The current generation now, the members of the current generation are not speaking correct English.
Okay.
Maybe let's say people of early 1980s and early 1990s, many of them didn't have maybe good English background. And most of them now want their children to speak good English. So now when your child goes to school where the English teacher is not doing enough, and you're forcing that child to speak English, you are speaking wrong English. Sometimes you see children speaking English and the grammar, the sentences, everything in that statement is wrong. So parents need to sit up. Government at all levels should make sure that the labs are used for what they were meant for, not for teachers to sit.
All right. Thank you very much, Daniel Okoye, for joining us on this edition. What we call you here is Dan. Thank you for joining us. Dan Okoye is teacher of English language, literature, and also a broadcast journalist who works with us here in ABS. He's a broadcast journalist, a language coach, a script editor, an education consultant, and as well as a translator. He is the author of this new book, Practical Oral English for Secondary Schools. He's been speaking to us on the motive, the purpose of this book, and why it is important in the training of your child. And especially now that schools are resuming on Monday. Most public schools will resume on Monday, while some other private schools will resume on the 15th of September. Whatever time that it is your child is resuming school, this is the time for you to provide some of these kind of materials. Even if Dan is not the person teaching your child, you can pick up this book and also help them learn, help them practice and prepare for their exams. Finally, I will ask you, for someone who is looking to get this book, where can he or she get them?
Okay, my publisher is Square Heritage here in Oka, and then the person can as well reach me.
All right. Maybe call your number before we go.
081 310 41113. I take that again. 081 310 41113. And any other, before maybe let me just add this. This book covers every aspect of test of oral English, which we call paper 3. Okay. And paper 3 is written under 45 minutes. And we have 60 objective questions. There's another area that is called stress. Many of us don't go there, stress. And it will interest you to know that we have emphatic stress when we place emphasis on a word in a sentence. And it's the easiest, but children don't see it as being an easy. When we ask you, Tade stole the history teacher's biro. Did Tade borrow the history teacher's biro? Did this, that's the easiest part of it. But because they were not tutored very well, they see it as, oh, a tedious task, and they end up not doing very well on that paper.
All right. Thank you very much, Dan, for joining us on this edition of the Weekend Show. I believe you must have seen the reason and why you should get this book, and also ensure that your child is properly equipped in the area of oral English as we resume school for the 2025-2026 academic session. We'll now take you over to our breakfast news studio for breakfast news at 8. Join us.